Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Dark Diaspora Africa Renaissance channel. I'm your host, Beau, and I have with me here Dr. Daniel Ekongwe. He's from Cameroon, and he currently works at he's a director of cabinet, to the Secretary General of the Pan-African Institute for Development. He has a background. He studied law, and he has a varying background, a quite extensive background. He studied in the United Kingdom at the Montfort University. He studied at the University of Leicester, for where he got his PhD, and also some studies in US in New Hampshire. He's lived in Italy for about 8 years, in the UK for about 10 years. He was a student activist in his time during his studies in Cameroon, and he has also been with the Pan-African Institute for Development since 2013. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Ekongwe. I'm really pleased to have you. I know we tried to have this this meeting, I think yesterday, but due to some difficulties, we couldn't have it. So I'm really glad you're here, and apologies to the viewers who tried to tune in but couldn't get through. So thank you very much. As you know, I reached out to you because I saw a video that was circulating on Facebook, where I think you were either coming out of a secretariat and you were asked some questions, and it was generally surrounding Pan-Africanism and the issues we face, hence the title of this show, which is a challenge on the Union of Africa and how to win the battle. So it's a pleasure to have you, and I'd like to say thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes.
And without patronizing, I think congratulations for your platform. For the African who finds such an opportunity, such a platform, contribution from different perspectives, different personalities and background. It is a holy grail. You know, my hope, like your wish and vision, is that we should be able to have a large following, that the scope should expand, where we have people from diverse backgrounds, political leaders, those in leadership position, academics, intellectuals, people with common knowledge of African culture and civilization, African tradition and religion. I'm not talking about Christianity here. I mean African religion, that is African civilization, to participate on this platform. I think it will give another trajectory to the challenges that we face, or we have been facing as a people, as a continent. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
So thank you very much. I really appreciate you, and I love finding comrades and people who are at the forefront of this ambition, and who are in the know of the achievements and the challenges that we face, and how to overcome them. I'll start by asking you, what is, for those who don't know, what is PAIDWA, Pan-African Institute for Development? What are they, and what do they do?
Yeah, the Pan-African Institute for Development was created in 1964 as an international association on the background of Pan-Africanism, when the political struggle was to establish the Organization of African Unity as a political front. And the Pan-African Institute was created as a training institution for middle-class experts who will handle developmental aspects of New Africa. So the age that we can assign to the defunct Organization of African Union, Organization of African Unity and African Union today, is the same age we will assign to the Pan-African Institute for Development. It was a project launched by Cameroonians, we're talking about diaspora, Africans who returned to Africa after their education. Particularly, there was a Swiss amongst them, Dr. Fernand Vincent, there was a meeting in Douala in Cameroon where they sat to discuss these problems. African countries, 33 of them have just had independence. The problem and solution is not political alone. Africa had huge problems of development, lack of expertise. They had studied in Europe, exposure, and seeing different dimensions of community and societal platforms and projects. And so they met, even with the wife of Singapore, of Senegal, even the president of Cameroon was a member of the scientific committee, and they put forth this project. And in 1964, the first institute was built in Douala, Cameroon. The organization is now continental with 5 regional institutes, 2 in Cameroon. The one in Douala is for Francophone Central Africa. The one in Beau, where I was before coming to the General Secretariat, was for Anglophone West Africa. And then there is one in Kabwe, in Zambia, which is for East and Southern Africa. There is another one in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, which is for Francophone West Africa. And in 2012, another regional institute was opened in Saleh, in Morocco, for Arabic North Africa. For Spanish-speaking African countries, one that is going to be opened in Cape Verde, and we are in negotiations with the government. So the philosophy behind this is Pan-Africanism. The focus is development. So in a summary, if the problem or the patient of the African Union is African political challenges, the patient and problem of the Pan-African Institute is African development.
Okay. Sorry. Please continue. Please continue. Sorry.
Yes. The Pan-African Institute for Development has diplomatic status and privileges. And the focus is on training, research, and support consultancy to governments, organizations, and individuals. And as an institution of higher education, we are in partnership with universities and governments around the world, as well as international organizations like UNESCO, like UNICEF, like ECOWAS, like the African Union. I think that's the basic background I can give you about the organization.
Okay, wow, it's the reach and the scope is quite extensive. I'm quite pleased to hear that, because there's something to know about these organs of say the African Union or Pan-Africanist movement. A lot of us are quite disenchanted with the drive, because we can go on the website for the African Union and see all the lofty plans of where we want to go, where we want to be, Agenda 2063. But then on the ground, some of us struggle to find how to connect or integrate or gain this kind of contact or connection with any kind of visible bodies. But it seems from what you're saying that they are fully branching out and having a clear outreach program that is going even beyond Africa and going, as you said, around the world, which is very, very pleasing to hear.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned when you said you provide some kind of advice or context to individuals, governments, companies. Say I pick one, for example, say for a company, how would you feed into or provide a service or kind of function for a company?
Yes. Let's we talk with examples. Say it could be a public health company.
Okay.
Young people, young Africans who have studied abroad, medicine, ophthalmologist, or any area of expertise or specialty, and they come back home. These are specialists in the medical field, and they want to integrate into the African society or a particular community and create a company. Now he is only a medical expert. He hasn't got expertise in human resource management. He hasn't got expertise in accountancy, finance, entrepreneurial management, business and accounting, and so forth. That is where we come in. And we say that with one phrase: the laboratory of the Pan-African Institute is in the field, and the principal methodology is local area study. So back to our example, such a professional hypothetically returns from overseas and is a medical doctor and wants to open a clinic. We have to do a needs assessment with him to say you want to establish in this particular city. We have to do a needs assessment by doing a local area study. The geography of that place, of that community or city or town or village, the history, the demographics, the culture, the financial institutions, the availability of local skills that would work with you. So when we identify those needs with him, and then we are able to identify what he needs as another skill to establish his business. So if he had employed 10 employees, we provide training for human resource, financial accounting, entrepreneurial skills, and so forth. That gives him an entrepreneurial background as a medical officer. He now knows the history of where he wants to run his business. He now knows the geography. He knows the culture of the people. And it builds a clientele relationship and trust and confidence that allows him to integrate in that society, that allows him to grow faster, that gives him the confidence to invest. And how does it work? If this example has worked in Cameroon, we apply the same, Cameroon, which is in Central Africa, we apply the same in East or Southern Africa, where there is the same situation, but paying attention to the specificity of that African region.
Okay, paying attention to the specificity. You must have an extensive catalog or library on the histories of all these peoples on different regions. Do you work with the local traditional leaders? Do you work with the religious and cultural? I mean, do you have a full scope? Do you really go in there and examine the whole? And if you find something that is say, how do you make a decision if you find something that may not be conducive for the business of the individual, and in trying to make the decision in which needs to bend for this union to happen?
I get it. The vision of the Pan-African Institute. I mean, I'll give the last line. The Pan-African Institute does not accept, receive, or make gifts that will influence its policy, training, research, and consultancy.
Okay.
Cameroon, for example, like I said before, we have 5 regional institutes that cover the regions. 5 regions in Africa. And I said the principal methodological tool or mechanics is local area study. You have to study the people, the geography, the history, the culture, before you will be able to understand critically the challenges, and then bring the opportunity for it to work. So in some studies, take for example in Cameroon, we have publications of village studies or village report. You know, take like what the American Security Service, the NSA, they have what they call area study.
Okay.
That is studying the culture, the geography, the history, and so forth of people. That same approach is what the Pan-African Institute uses. We call it local area study of each community with experts, ethnographers, historians, culturalists, and so forth. Identify problems and then provide solutions.
Okay.
Yeah, so to cut it short, wherever there is a controversy, well, we stick with the facts and the evidence, provided it brings development. The issue is the research, the problem, the solution must affect development.
I see.
Yes.
That's very clear. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask about your outreach going globally now. How does the diaspora get involved?
Yes, a minute. Oui, elle est partie. Oui. Je suis engagé, je suis engagé. Oui, ça va, gars, ça va prendre des mains. Sorry, mate.
No, that's fine, that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. Sorry, it's, I had an interruption.
Yeah. You're busy. Yes, yes. So I was talking about the diaspora and what your responsibilities are or thoughts are on the inputs of the diaspora to your project and to your vision.
Yeah. The diaspora, I heard you with, I think you said the other day, on the other video, and you get a proper definition of diaspora. Diaspora is more aligned to the Jews, the Israelites. That's where the word came from.
Yes.
Away from their home, away from Palestinian land. And then now, when it's now applied or used to the general away population of a country. Those who moved away from their home and established life elsewhere. With the African, it's been. I had this problem before at the Montfort, where we had the BBC organized a program, and the coordinator of the ethnic program of the BBC was talking of the diaspora in Britain as if it is the Caribbean. And I challenged her to say, I am sitting here, a Cameroonian from Africa, and you are talking of the African diaspora or British black as if that simply means the Caribbean. You get it?
I get it.
Yes, and it is that same situation, not to go far, that David Lammy in Parliament in England was now challenging Amber Rood.
Oh, you saw the video. You saw the video, yes.
We got a misrepresentation of what the African diaspora is because of the politics, because of some stereotype. Some Africans think they are better than the other African descendants. I saw this in the US. I saw this in England. You understand? And there were moments, and I'll tell you something, mate. My PhD is titled African Diaspora, Cameroonians in Britain. That took me through Europe and the Americas, all over. Because I wanted to experience, I wanted to observe and see this African diaspora, what it really is. Because I was looking for one thing. What I wanted to prove in my PhD was, is there a common denominator of the African diaspora, not skin color? Skin color cannot be that denominator of the African diaspora. That will be subjective. That's why in my video, after the African Dignity Forum, I said, it is the African spirit, the way you think, the way you interact, the way you live, your way of life. That is the common denominator. It is not skin color. And I wanted to go to Jamaica, and some friends in Leicester who are Caribbean said, Danny, do not go there. They will kill you. I said, why? They said, no, because they have a different analysis. They say, oh, you Africans that your great-grandparents sold our own great-grandparents and so forth and so forth. I said, but
which is true.
I was there, and I was surprised. I went to the US, and I'm in Maryland, in New Hampshire, and I want to go down south, Africa or something, where they were explaining to me that there is a replication of African, and they said, Danny, no, because your accent would not resemble, it's going to betray you. I said, no, there should be the African spirit, not skin color or my accent. That if I live in London, I must have a British London accent because I want to fit into a nightclub. That is very wrong. That is where we got the interpretation of the diaspora very wrong. And why is that peculiar in Britain, what Lamy is saying? The British institution, the British black, those that are born there of Caribbean origin, they think that if they say, or they believe that if they say British black, it means those who are descendants of the Windrush generation. It is very wrong.
I agree
is the context. I lift it, even though there is an exception to every rule, because in Leicester, we had connections with other Caribbeans that were able to work together, do things together, and so forth. There's some that were not as educated as myself, but who understood the essence of this African diaspora, that it is not skin color. You know, so this issue of diaspora, I also explained in my video to say that what is the common denominator? And I gave 3 examples. What is it that can bring the African together? Whether in Africa, Caribbean, America, Europe, or where else. We'll take an example. The music, the African music today is no more individual, it's no more national. What are you doing in Black Panther? That dance, that rhythm. That is the African spirit. And everyone now is now identifying to that spirit. You cannot say it's a Cameroon music now. No. You cannot say it's a Nigerian music, even though the origin is from African high life. And I want to link it. I want to link that to R&B music. When I was I went to the University of Maryland to meet a professor in the history department. And I went into the library, I bought some clips because I wanted to study the origins and evolution of the R&B music. And you find out that it all comes from the religious spirituality of Africans. And we were able to transform that culture into a multi-billion-dollar industry, even though there are other communities that have control over some of this business.
Yes.
And from James Brown to move on and up to Jay-Z and those that we have today, it has become a business dominated by African, based on African culture and African spirituality. It is the same thing that is happening with the African music today. That is where the diaspora comes in. Because of the sophistication and exposure and technology out of Africa, the diaspora has been able to play great contribution, because musicians, home-based musicians, have been able to create a partnership with the African diaspora. Take Akon. Akon has come out there, Senegalese, sort of a Senegalese diplomat, and fitted in that R&B society, and then others have now followed that pattern. People like P Square and Fino and so forth. If you see their sophistication, it has been able to transform the African musical context from what we would say was less sophisticated into, the word modern is also very dangerous, into a global audience. And now it's no more a Nigerian music, it's no more a Ghanaian music, it's no more a Cameroonian music, it's no more a Tanzanian music, it's an African music.
Yes,
another example, Beyonce, to launch the choreography of one of her clips, she had to go to Ethiopia and Kenya to get African dancers taken over to the US because she needed African choreography. It is on the basis of this, my friend, that I'm saying that the African diaspora plays a huge part. Partnership. Those of us at home, government, community, students, entrepreneurs, chiefs, leaders, and the African diaspora identify a problem, bring in people with brains, not just intellectuals, common sense and wisdom, put up a project, it will work. Why am I so sure? How did Pan-Africanism begin? It was a partnership. Du Bois, Sylvestre, and all that, they were all in Europe and America, not so. And then the Nkrumah and the rest of other home-based Africans who had gone to study abroad, they formed a partnership. That is how Africa was able to get independence. Because as part of security studies, which is one of my expertise, is that exposure of Du Bois and Sylvester, Marcus Garvey, and the rest, and Kwame Nkrumah and Senghor, all those who had come from Africa and they meet together, there was a melange. And they identified the problem and with time provide a solution and we gain independence. I think it is because of that confidence that Du Bois even came and lived his last days in Ghana to feel a sense of achievement, because that sense of achievement for an African, whether at home or in the diaspora, is not there. It's not there. That sense of achievement of an African American, British, Black, Caribbean, Trinidadian, whosoever of the Black spirit is here in Africa. You may make all the billions wherever you are, but what have you impacted on your community? I saw a picture the other day where there was a picture of Jay-Z and P. Diddy and so many of them, and somebody calculated their total worth and said, but what have they given back to the community? That is the African spirit. That is the African denominator. Sense of community. Indeed. Individualism is not an African concept.
I agree.
Individualism is not an African personality. These philosophies, we have to develop them. We have to communicate them. Thanks to technological globalization, the age of the media and communication, this information must go out to the African society, African community, wherever we are. The African spirit is family. It's a sense of community, that the pride comes from a sense of achievement of what you have given back from where you come from. It doesn't stop you from enjoying your billions in your yacht or holidays or vacation. No, but your sense of achievement is what have you given back to the society. That's the African personality. Nobody teaches us that. It is in the DNA of every African. It is. So I think that is the common denominator, and that is why I pay so much attention on the African diaspora. And that African diaspora does not mean Afro-American or African-American or British Black. No, the one that has this African spirit and blood running in his veins. That is where it comes from. We may give so much interpretations. Those interpretations maintain us on a permanent pedestal. And what is that? Accusation. Accusing people. What do we call a law? Accusatory approach. It is very wrong. For how long will the African accuse? I accept. I know it. Everyone would accept that the misconception about Africans is a European creation. Settled. But yes, we have to stop it there, and all that accusation, European. No, we move forward and create an alternative system to what they have created. Because the European created a misconception about the African and then brought in his own system. And then, this, for example, the state system from the Westphalian Treaty, 1648 in Onnersburg in Germany. They all sat after the 30 Years' War and created, okay, this is France, this is Germany, this is Austria, this is Russia. And they created their rules. Sovereignty, autonomy, non-interference into the affairs of the other country and so forth. These are their rules. They created the international system, rules of diplomacy and so forth. These are their rules. That is the European world order. That is not an African world order. An African world order also existed. We had our own nation system where kings and princes and princesses and so forth went and visited each other, pilgrimages, and there was an economy booming. There was intellectualism at Timbuktu and so forth, but it has all been replaced by the European system. that we do not have mastery of those rules. That's why Africa continues to be dominated, because we do not have mastery of those rules. They are not our rules. We are just simple game player. The other countries, the other race, the other parts of the world that have been able to circumvent this European world order, they have stayed within the fabric of their own civilization. The Indians, the Chinese, have stayed within their own civilization, no doubt. Scooping some technology and some intelligence or expertise from the European. But the European first went and stole from the other side, and then took it back to his own, to create his own civilization. So whether he's an Indian or he's a Pakistani who went and studied nuclear physics and took it, Khan, and went back to Pakistan, mathematics and arithmetic, is it not Arabic with origin?
Yes.
So he simply just gone back there, and the Europeans during colonization got all of this and went back. So he's simply just taking that knowledge and back to his country and develop it and adapt it to his own reality. The Chinese have done so. The Indians have done so. The North Koreans have done so. Why is Africa refusing to do that? Why is Africa refusing to raise up its game? They say it's a problem of leadership. Yes, but if it's a problem of leadership, how can we solve the problem of leadership? The diaspora has a part to play. A lot of exposure, a lot of expertise, a lot of different experiencing in life. I'll give you an example. In England, there are 733 physicians from Cameroon. In England, there are 733 as of 2012. There were 733 physicians of Cameroonian origin in England. What are they doing there? If the leadership in Cameroon cannot create a forum to accommodate that diaspora, to come and create clinics, to come and provide public health to our own population and people, they cannot come. Those who come is because they have not been able to either fit into the system, or they got tired as I got tired and came back home. After you've understood the system very well, you understand that I do not have a place there. It's education. We can have education anywhere. So that is where I think the diaspora counts. If we have to create a database, of how many of these different specialties of Africans are out there, it will be another good project. But then the question will come to say their wages, their salary, how much will they gain back home here? That's a challenge. But there's an opportunity. Yeah, are we there?
The suggestion you made. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the suggestion you made.
Yes.
I think there might be an echo. Let me check something first. Yeah, the suggestion you made about a database is one I've thought about before. Yes. And I think it's definitely quite pertinent and important because you cannot, if you have a shortfall in an industry in your country, yes, and you're looking for people to fill it, how do you know what's out there? Instead, they run straight to India, to China, to everyone else, but they don't know that they have that sizable body out there that can come and fill it and still contribute. They have families already, still back home, contribute, yes, to your, it doesn't only have to do with money. There are ways you can compensate people that is not, yes, just with money.
Yes. I want to give an example. While doing my PhD at De Montfort, at a certain point in time, I ran into financial difficulties. And I thought, well, I would come back home and with the little money I had gathered, I would be able to cope.
Okay.
There are some friends with whom we studied in Italy back in 1999. He is an architect. And at the end of he had lived in Italy for 14 years. And he left Italy and packed all his things and came back to Cameroon. He did not buy a car. He did not buy suits. As an architect, he bought this mechanical motors, where he will come and create little machines and so forth. The Cameroonian community was laughing at him. That, oh, he's been in Europe 14 years, he's going back home, cannot even take a simple car and so forth. 3 years after, when I met him, he was already a director of a road construction company based in Yaoundé, the capital. And it was like he was going to explode with expertise, with the opportunity that was given in front of him to manage that company. He's the one who told me to say, Danny, go back, finish, come back here. That Europe, we're wasting so much time there. And when I came back, my own family found it difficult to say, what have I come to do back in this country? And I said, you cannot understand. But then, from 2013 to 2017, I am the Deputy Secretary General of this organization. Because you come with different exposure, different ideas, experience, and a sense of organization and purpose, that a project put before you, you engage into it. That is what the diaspora gains, that sense of organization. You know, and many other examples that I have seen of returnees who have come back, within a short period of time, they have been able to succeed in the project they came back with.
Oh, hello? I think I might be having some difficulty. So sorry, no, go ahead. You're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there are different examples, so many different examples, whether it's here or in Nigeria where I have been, or in Ethiopia. You see those who have returned come back with a focus. So it is not usually the salary that can be a problem. It is returning with a project in the head, a focus, and then have a good orientation. And 3 years, if we give it, if we give each project a lifespan, 3 years is the time to plant, is the time to build that organization. And after 3 years, there is extraordinary success. Those who have come and have not succeeded, they did not do that homework. They thought it was very easy, that you would just come, or because you're coming from Europe and so forth, with all that stereotype and just move. No, if you come with a professional spirit, that is what the experience in Europe gives, a professional spirit. You come back with that focus, you will succeed in whatever project you want to do, even without a franc. Even without a franc. Because the African society has the safety net, which is a family base. So even after several years in Europe, you come back only with ideas in your head. This family support gives you a place to stay. Even if you do not build a house, you will live in the family house. That's the African spirit. And then that trust, that confidence, that family warmth pushes your confidence up, and you want to show them what you bring or what you brought. And you begin to push that project. They will only be watching and looking at you and see how it will succeed. There will be commentaries left and right. We will see what will happen. We want to see that magic. After 3 years, it will explode. And you will see everybody begin to now say, we said it was going to work. This is the experience. I have seen it. I teach it to my students. It's whether I am teaching an army general, whether I am teaching an ambassador, whether I am teaching a 5-star commissioner, whether I'm teaching a young child of 19-year-old, the approach has worked. Because I have seen these changes after they come to us in the Pan-African Institute, and we explain these things to them. It's not teaching, it's training. It's not teaching, it's training, giving them extraordinary ideas, different from the common things they think every day. And once it is put into application, you see the grand success.
Wow.
Yes. So this is the essence of that diaspora. That is that experience, that exposure, that professionalism, that focus. You know.
And dare I say, even freedom. Freedom. There's a freedom of expression and ambition, because you know you can go out and achieve. So I think when you bring that back, whatever obstacles are in your way, you can just see the clear process of how to just get it out. You know, yes. you can challenge it now and say, why do this instead of it's like a process diagram. If you see all the bottlenecks, you can just eliminate them immediately and make it very straightforward. Yes. Whereas when people are in the system, I've been doing it for decades, they cannot see the difference.
That's it. So that partnership, our topic is that partnership between home base and the diaspora is fundamental for Africa to move to the next stage, for Africa to come out of this dependency syndrome. For Africa, let's get to the draft title you gave. For Africa to get out of this wars as a winner. For Africa to get out of this war as a winner, there must be a partnership between home base and the diaspora. Because the challenges that Africa is facing, the war that is being aimed at Africa keeps changing. There is a mutation of this war to keep Africa at a permanent stage of dependency. I explain it very short. World order, the world system, the international system was not created by Africans. To sustain it, what the creators do, I mean, the European system, they throw these challenges. From colonization, when African countries won independence, the immediate 20 years, what happened? There was a series of civil wars and coup d'etats. That was the second phase of, that was the second type of war that the Western world threw on Africa. The first one was colonization, possession. When Africans got into partnership, home-based Africans and diaspora, and they overcame that colonization with African independence, but we got into state system, European state system. It was difficult for African leaders to hold their societies together. You had military leaders with ambitions and so forth. The Europeans exploited, in order to continue that domination, exploited that weakness. And from 1963 to 1979, there were 36 coup d'etats, civil wars in Africa, with the deaths of 9 African presidents. After 1979, fall of the Berlin Wall, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan came in. What else? Africans had mastered civil military relationship, and so there could not be any more civil war or coup d'etats in African countries to overthrow leaders and so forth and put in puppets. Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, we got into liberalization, structural adjustment program. It became now an economic war. No more military, no, it became now an economic war through structural adjustment program. Unfortunately for the African, when the World Bank and the IMF brought these projects, the Asian countries and Indians with Africans that had the same gross domestic product by 1947 did not accept the conditions brought by the World Bank and the IMF. They accepted the investments, the investors' finances, but say that this project, we want to develop them to our own culture, according to the realities of our countries, did not negotiate that way. They took the package. And we know the impact of structural adjustment program.
Yes. That was
third phase. By the time African countries overcame that economic war, and African countries were beginning to realize double-digit economic growth, America had, the Western world had defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War, and the Cold War had ended. The world had become a unipolar world under American domination. What was the American agenda? Liberal democracy. That is what was now thrown at Africa. Liberal democracy in the 1990s. And we got destabilization all over from that process. And what followed it was the war on terror. Because at each time you want to show mastery of what has been thrown at you, it's simply pulling the locker and pull out the next agenda. And when Africans overcame the economic war, we got into liberal democracy and what? War on terror. The United States, to push forward its agenda of democratization, used former Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia as a laboratory to test this agenda. And that is where all these wars of identity and fragmentation of state, that is where it began. That was a laboratory. And now it's the new war that has been thrown on Africa. After the Middle East, we know the story in Iraq, Yemen, Syria. It's fragmentation of states, war of identities, Sunnis against Shia, Christians against Muslims, this tribe against Ndebeles and this Shonas in Zimbabwe. That's the agenda. When the African governments or system began to understand this, what? The war on terrorism all over the place now. And 70 countries in the world are applying the agenda of the war on terror. That is just to maintain the American agenda. As African countries begin to understand this is the fifth phase of the war, of the challenges. We now get into the new phase, which is cyber war, manipulation of information technology. That is a new dimension we are going, because the Western system, the Western world order led by Anglo-American power, has understood that the new world order is based on regionalism. Regional leaders, individual independent countries are no longer following the agenda of pushed forward by the US. And so we see an emergence of regional autonomy, regional orders, like the African Union, like ASEAN, like the Eurasian Union, like NAFTA, and so forth. That's the new dimension now. And that politics of the other word that was going to be brought of regime change that they used with Saddam Hussein, regionalism has caused it in a way that America can no longer apply that. Else they would have done the same application in Syria for regime change with Bashar. It is regime change that they wanted to do with the Sudanese president, with Omar al-Bashir. That was the agenda for regime change. So because regionalism has sort of prevented that, and the African continent split into these 4 regional or 5 regional organizations, it's been difficult for the US to carry out that implementation, a part of on terrorism that they want to force on other African countries. That's why you have Boko Haram in Cameroon here, taking the central, the region of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon.
Okay, I'll come to this. Speaking now on the 4 or 5 regions in Africa, I know you previously mentioned that we've adopted and maintained these state systems, which is un-African.
Yes.
So what do you think is the solution? Because, there's been lots of, in fact, I won't give you a premise. What do you think is the solution? Because now it seems regionalism is what's on the cards, with East African Federation set to subsume about 6 countries into it. There's already ECOWAS there, there's SADC, there's Central African Republic. So is this breaking away of the state system, and is it getting into a more historical African system, social system, or is this playing into the hands of what the old world order is wanting us to do?
Yeah, it's your question is similar to the presentation I think you did on Bantu Federation.
Yes.
I saw the video about that, going back into ethnicity and, the examples like Biafra and Anglophone Cameroon and the Maasai and Kasai and so forth.
Mm.
Yeah, what we should understand is that first, in as much as this world system or world order is a European creation, the international borders form the basis of every nation today in international law.
Yes.
In as much as there are questions of marginalization that would cause some regions of a particular state to want to break away. But international law only recognizes the boundaries created at independence. That creation took away the essence of the African reality. Because before the coming of the Europeans, there were nations in Africa because there were empires.
Yes.
Ruled by kings and queens and so forth. There were distinguished territories that belonged to a particular ethnocultural group, which was a nation. Now, the African Union has adopted those colonial boundaries. And that is what operates in international law. What happened in South Sudan, the breakaway of Sudan, was because there was particular interest. The US particularly had an interest in what was going on there. That's why they were able to split Sudan on the basis of religion. A Christian and animic South and an Islamic North. It's the same thing. If back in 1967 or 66, a particular power had interest in the Biafran case, it would have worked. They would have become a state. It's simply because there was no, countries. We have more powerful countries and weaker countries.
Mm.
That's the truth. There are bigger countries and there are smaller countries in terms of wealth, in terms of military might, in terms of resources, expertise, and so forth.
Yes.
So, and with the essence of international organizations like the United Nations, which was the guarantor of this world order to recognize these international boundaries. Within the Security Council of the United Nations, there are 5 permanent members there. If one of those 5 permanent members has an interest in a particular territory and the others do not have interest, they will negotiate and that territory will become independent. That's how the world works. That's what happened in South Sudan. One bigger country had an interest in that division, and it worked. In the other parts of the world, where such divisions have not led to a recognition of a new state, it's because there has not been sufficient interest from these bigger powers. So to come back to our African context, the African Union and the United Nations recognizes those colonial established boundaries. The internal issues of marginalization that would cause a particular region to want to break away.
Mm.
These are internal issues, but it cannot bring back the glory of that past Africa that was linked culturally or was together, if I could say so. Because those colonial boundaries have broken. I'll give you an example. Cameroon, my country, has a 6,000-mile boundary with Nigeria.
Okay.
With 6 different states. Those of us who are at the littoral, at the south, across those borders, they are one and the same people,
Yes.
living in 2 different countries.
Yes. Agreed.
in terms of names, in terms of culture, in terms of cultural and historical societies, in terms of dress code, in terms of tribal marks, in terms of the spirit, the same people. You have the Boki, people, you have the Efik people, and so forth. So if I should take a hypothesis about the Bantu Federation, what becomes of that to recreate that empire that once existed, speaking the same language? If we go up north, another second example, if we go up north Cameroon, you have what they call the Kanuri people. Yes. The Kanuri people are in Nigeria, are in Cameroon, are in Niger, are in Chad. That area, they crisscross the boundary, the frontier. The same language, the same spirit, the same tribal marks, the same dress code, everything, the same religion. If we are going to create a Bantu Federation or to create recreate African states based on those ethno-cultural identities, what is going to happen from these 4 countries? There's going to be tough international negotiations. That could be endless. And with the different cultures that they have inherited for 54 years now since independence, it's just going to create it's just going to create the basis for for conflicts. Take the example of the Senegambia Union. It did not last. The Senegambia Union did not last. My argument for maintaining the status quo, but building it with a Pan-African platform, is that bigger states can negotiate. I gave the statistics. Africa is the second largest continent in the world with more than 1.2 billion people as a population. That is good for negotiation on the international stage than individual countries that we break them down again into smaller states. We break them down again into smaller states. The only advantage is that it's going to increase the number of African states in the United Nations, which up to now has not been able to make any impact. Because impact in the United Nations is not in the General Assembly, it's in the Security Council.
Yes.
So Africa together negotiates for one African place in the Security Council. That is where the negotiations take place. And we will be negotiating on the basis of our population, the size of our continent, and so forth. Unfortunately, in the area of international negotiations, we are lacking in that area. I mean, as Africans, we are lacking in the area of expertise in international negotiations. That's why our own governments cannot sign good deals with foreign investors.
I feel this is by design.
Sorry?
I feel this is by design.
It is. That's why I say it is a system created not by Africans. It's a European creation. And they would want to maintain that status quo by supporting only the project that maintains the status quo.
Then why not do away with the United Nations?
The world operates under the basis of international law. And why we may want to argue or make such propositions, it is not practicable. Some will say that, but what of the Chinese or the Russians? They have never pulled away from it. What they have rather done, they have rather closed their borders and developed from within. That's how great empires throughout history have grown. They shut their borders and develop within, and then expose what they have been able to produce to the rest of the world. That's what China did.
Exactly, and I've made this argument many a times to a lot of colleagues.
Yes,
that is what Africa needs to do themselves.
That's what China did. I'm trying to look around some. There's a text that I could use quite often on that, because we have to talk with evidence. We have to discuss these things with practical examples. There's an article I wrote on my Facebook page. I do a lot of writing there about the North Korean crisis. And I said, why has America not been able to attack North Korea? But they went to Saddam Hussein. They've gone to Syria. Why have they not gone to North Korea? North Korea understood the game and developed nuclear weapons. We don't appreciate it. We don't want nuclear weapons because it is dangerous for humanity. But they knew that is the bargain. If the Western mind knows that you have the capability of retaining his evil, he will negotiate with you one-on-one, win-win. Because the Western mind is not a creation of this century. It's a creation that has lived for centuries. I'll give an example. Pope Barnabas in the 11th century declared war on Palestine, and he was in France, and he said, go forth to this land that the Bible says flows with milk and honey, and take it away from these people who are worthless. That was a pope giving an order. From that 11th century till today, has that policy changed? It's basically the same. The West is focused on the Middle East to rip it off the Palestinians, to rip it off the owners of that land, and will not create a favorable situation for which they can share with the Jews, because it's a motherland for all of them. But it is on the basis of the word unleashed by Pope Barnabas that this politics of Western domination and this grabbist attitude is still being pushed up till today. And basically, that is the mentality of the Western mind, I mean of the European, I mean of, in what common language they call a white man. Because the Chinese is not a white man. It's a European who is a white man. If we have to go to that, that sort of description that is used in the common parlance. It is a mentality to dominate, to take what belongs to other people and use it for themselves and use it against even the person from whom those things were taken from. That's the basic line foundation of European civilization.
But then this creates a dire picture, because it seems as if the choice is to just play ball and try and play ball as good as possible. But when the game is rigged from the start all the way through, playing ball, negotiating, having very good diplomats who will do nothing to change the system, which is why I thought of this Bantu Federation the same in the first instance, in that Africa would do better outside the United Nations, except they have a foothold in Security Council as well, except they have a foothold in the other committees and councils that control global economics or global policies. And as we don't have that, then we are a mere spectator in our own downfall.
You're very right. I'm going to give you the statistics.
Okay.
While Africa, while we will remain in this position, international relations is assumed to be interstate relations. But international relations today and global politics, the actors, let me put it the other way, the actors in global politics or international relations and diplomacy is not only independent states. There are different actors now play more important roles and influence policy and decision, whether at the United Nations or the international system. I'll give you the data.
Okay.
There are 200 governments in the global system, including 192 member states of the United Nations. Okay. There are 77,200 transnational companies, such as Vodafone, Ford, and Shell, and so forth. They are, and they have produced 773,000 affiliates. There are more than 10,000 single country non-governmental organizations, such as Population Concern in the UK. There are 246 intergovernmental organizations, such as the UN, NATO, African Union, European Union, and so forth. There are 7,300 international non-governmental organizations, such as Amnesty International. All of this, none, all of this, except the African Union, none has been created in Africa or by an African. So it cannot influence world politics. You got the data. That is the world system. That is world order. This is the part 2 of the video I put on before, when I say that until Africa understands the rules of the game, we cannot come out of it. We cannot win the war, to use that word. This is the game. The first 100 TNCs, transnational companies, multinational companies in the whole world, about 57 are US based and owned. About 23 are from the UK. One is from Canada. One is from China. One is from Russia. One is from South Africa. One is German. How can we compete? How can we contribute in that system of financial flow, of investment, of creating resources, of planning 10-year change of the demographics of our population, of calculating the transition of our governments in the next 20 years, when we have presidents that are already 85 years of age? Have we planned what is going to happen when it goes out? That's why there is chaos every time there's transition. We do not have mastery of these things. It is being controlled by all of this information I've given it to you. That's the system. I followed another video where we talked of voting, taking elections. That is just for the gallery. That is for the gallery. It is the same thing in the US. Hillary Clinton won by 2 million popular votes. Is she president? She is not. It's the electoral college of those power brokers who identify their interests and say, well, this person will best solve us our problems or give us greater opportunities. That's why Trump is president. So in Africa, it's the same thing, whether based on tribal lineage, but principally it's on the support from this investor. There was a time in my country, Cameroon, that 44% of the economy was in the hands of the French. 44%. What do we produce? We barely produce for consumption. Do we produce, for production, for marketing, international marketing? Or do we produce to satisfy even the population? We do not. I'll give another example. In all over Africa, I mean it, every city or the majority of cities in Africa are named after a river. All over Africa, every city or village is named after a river. Where do we produce electricity from? Is it not from water? Be little dams. How comes Africa we were not autonomous in electricity supply up to even to be able to sell abroad? Africa has largest deserts all over the place. How come we are not getting into this solar power energy thing? I think Morocco has just gotten into that. How come it is the other people who do not have sunlight, they are the ones to use and then come and sell to us tomorrow? Yeah. So it's not the politics. It's here. It's mental. It's mental. It's mental.
As you said, mental. Then that brings me to education. The education of the child, of the young person who has grown up to a man now, is the Eurocentric education. What is the focus on this with people, with groups and organizations like PAIDOA and even the African Union? I mean, I've read the Agenda 2063, and it does make some mention about the type of education being Afrocentric. But last time I checked, and I've mentioned this before, the child in Nigeria is not learning Swahili. He's not learning the history of people like Cheikh Anta Diop. He's not learning the history of Queen Nzinga. It's only learning Isaac Newton, the Queen, slavery. They're learning the same things over and over and over again. How will that elevate their mind and their thinking to be able to see these things that you are clearly espousing right now? What is happening with education on the continent?
Yeah, I think the curriculum and pedagogic approach is changing. It's changing because the diaspora, lots have gone out and come back, and those that have studied even back home have realized that the curriculums of most university or educational institutions are ill-adapted to the needs of Africa. And so curriculums are changing, and there are blocks of regional recognition of certificates and training programs and pedagogy that are insisting on new curriculums and so forth. We are doing that in the Pan-African Institute. That's why I said we are not doing teaching, we are doing training. So most of our programs, whether it is peace, conflict, international relations, security studies, human resource management, agriculture and environment, project management, and regional planning, these are curriculums created by us. It's not tailor-made. What we should understand is that state-run institutions, like state universities, that's where those are practical, that's where most of these things have been happening. State-run universities. Because this, there is an overbearing presence of these former colonial countries. Secondly, it is not that people have not published innovative material, but most governments and ministries of national education, because of the overbearing presence of these colonialists, it's still there, it's still pressing, do not implement these new curriculums as we would love them to be. But there has been a great change. There's been a great change across Africa, across the board, that these curriculums are now adapted to African realities. The only issue is we have to go innovative areas of study and research. Historical studies, anthropology, sociology, legal studies, medicines, and so forth. And we see there is a change across. If my case, as I went to Ethiopia or to Nigeria and so forth, I have seen it. There is a change in the approach of these things. In some of my writings, I say that it is generational politics. It is generational politics. What do I mean by this? At independence, some historical families dominated the political scene. And as a father who were pioneers were going out of the political system and decision line of command, their children dropped in. That is how most of the politics in Africa and across the world operates. Generational politics is handed over from one generation to another, following family lines. Generational. They've done a study like that at Oxford and in Italy. And for 100 years, that report shows that at Oxford and at Cambridge, particular families have studied particular area like law and medicine. Those families that are dominating world politics, they have remained there in Cambridge and Oxford for 100 years. They go there and study the law or history or medicine. And you see them in continuation in world politics. If we go to the US, it's the same. We go to India, it's the same. You go to China, it's the same. It doesn't mean that there are no exceptions of new families coming in. there have been some breakthroughs. Some other families have been able to get into political and the political limelight or academic limelight or financial or investments and so forth. But those historical families throughout the world continue to dominate the world order. So this education things, it represents their interest. It's a representation of their history. And so they are reluctant to allow governments to change these curriculums. But because of private education now, which has taken a grip in Africa, there's a change. And even the level of intellectualism has moved to a higher plane, that there is innovation, there is innovative approach into the design into curricular design in research and university studies. So there's a positive in that dimension. African education is no more inadequate as it used to be. No, that has changed. That has changed. The only issue, the only challenge is lack of publications. Lack of public research and publication. That is where the problem is. Do not have publication houses. We do not have publication houses of renowned standard, international standing. Publication is just opening a small printing house, and you produce and you give them out to your students. When we talk of research and publication, big houses like Penguin and so forth. That area is lacking in Africa. In much of the English-speaking African countries, that sector has been developed. French-speaking African countries is another problem.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's go into education. Let's have a couple more questions. I'm going to round up. The other one was, okay, what have been your successes so far, the great landmark successes since working with PAVA that you can elaborate on?
Yeah, you mean as an individual or as the organization?
Both.
Okay. As the organization, the Pan-African Institute had the mandate in partnership with Mohammed V University in Morocco to mobilize 100 universities across sub-Saharan Africa to participate in the International Climate Change Conference, what they call COP22 2016. The climate change agenda that Obama signed and President Trump is now revoking. The Pan-African Institute for Development was at the forefront of that conference.
I see.
Some of those letters, I wrote them. The letters that went out to the presidents and university chancellors. It was in my office here that all of that was done. We sent out to 100 universities in sub-Saharan Africa to participate, and we let my organization led that delegation. And 2 proposals by the Secretary General of the Pan-African Institute at that conference was accepted as part of the general resolution. 1, that climate change discourse must be included or should be included in the curriculum from primary school right up to university study.
Wow,
that's educational sensitization and make it academic. Because climate change is real. Climate change is real. I mean, people feel it. We see it every day.
Yes.
Second, the Pan-African Institute had proposed that to stop the expanding nature of the Saharan desert, there should be a belt from Mauritania to Chad, where we're going to plant Arabic gum. Arabic gum is an economic plant, but also provides a lot of shade and will protect the expansion of the desert.
Okay.
So if that can be planted from Mauritania in the far west right up to Chad, across the breadth, the midlands of Africa like that, it's going to stop the expansion of the Saharan desert. And it's going to create vegetation and even economic activity, because Arabic gum is an economic product. So that's a significant contribution at world stage. And so on some personal issues is that this area of study is what I actually created a bachelor's program and bachelor's degree and master's degree in terms of research, and I had called it one of the courses is post-Cold War world order, which is part of our study in peace, conflict, and international relations. If we do not understand post-Cold War world order, we are not going to be able to understand why there are so many wars in Africa, conflicts. And from that, what the impact that I want to create is, I'm working on a professorial discourse to say that the world order, the emerging world order, should be focused on climate change, on the impact of climate change on human security, not the war on terror, on terrorism. That's my hypothesis. Why do I argue? Why am I doing all this research? It's because in terms of casualty, in terms of destruction, in terms of the pain and suffering, in terms of logistics and so forth, climate change has caused more havoc, has caused more death and destruction of property than terrorism. Why are African countries paying attention to war on terror and agenda for terrorism rather than climate change and human security? We are being led in that same direction of their game. That is their system. They have mastery of that system. They have mastery of that game of terrorism. So Africa should simply create an alternative order or system and focus the African governments and civil society and academia, universities should focus on human security, impact from climate change, not terrorism. How many people have terrorism killed? We feel sorry for those that have died and lost property from it. But in terms of let's compare it to climate change and human security. Desertification, loss of farmland, illnesses, and destruction of ecosystems, and flooding. All this is what we should focus on. The destruction of family. I'll give an example. The number of casualties, people killed in Nigeria, the victims from the conflict of farmer-header conflict, is 10 times more than what Boko Haram has done for how many years? So why should the Nigerian government be focusing on terrorism, Boko Haram, instead of focusing on farmer-header conflict, pastoralism? Why? It has misdirection of policy.
I agree.
If we go to Southern Africa, to Tanzania and Kenya and so forth, it's the same problem. Why focus on terrorism when you have farmer-header conflict all over the place? In Cameroon, why don't we focus on the disappearance of Lake Chad? We're talking about Boko Haram, when Lake Chad, which is a whole ecosystem. Lake Chad used to be one of the largest lakes in Africa. It's now reduced. And it's going extinct. We are not focusing on that. We are focusing on terrorism. That is not an agenda. That simply saps the economy. That simply gets you to depend on the militarism of the West.
Who are bringing in their bases and trying to, settle down to extend their agenda again.
Because they want to continue to sell their arms. Because, my friend, the Western world only dominates the rest of the world today in military terms. Apart from military terms, the Western world has no more domination over the rest of the world. That is their lone monopoly. And they can't leave it. That's why they create wars all over the place to be able to continue to sell arms left and right. We've seen it. In terms of information technology, the Indians, Chinese, and so forth, little children in secondary schools are producing watches and drones and so forth. And credit to Silicon Valley. And you get young children in the US, like President Obama was saying, they spend time eating popcorn and drinking Coke. And just thinking to America, make America great again. How? Through militarism. The rest of the world has moved on. The world does not need military might. The world does not need nuclear weapons. It's useless. The world needs to look at the challenges facing humanity. Public health, create new products, new environment, and so forth. Not militarism. What are we doing with nuclear weapons? For what? Absolutely. What are we doing with guns all over the place? It doesn't serve the purpose for an African, whether in the diaspora or back home. It doesn't serve the purpose.
Absolutely. I agree. There's a lot of misguided policies, but then again, this leadership, I mean, some people have said leadership is also a result of the people, and the people make the leaders, and the leaders subjugate the people. It's like a chicken and eggs scenario. What is it? Up until when this education pervades a larger portion of society, then we'll get people who now have the mindset and mentality to challenge the status quo. Or is it just we have to be lucky to get some good leader to get in there on a mandate and change things wholesale? I mean, we say the issue is leadership in Africa, but I mean, that might just be a more myopic view sometimes, because, you know, we can say Trump is not a great leader, right? But he's still getting some things done. I mean, there's some other despots in various countries. There's still Putin in Russia. You know, but at the same time, Russia can still be productive. At the same time, China has a unitary system. They can still be productive. Yeah. So do we put, I mean, leadership is obviously important, but then what can we do? Because we have about, you know, so 50, 54, 55 states, countries in Africa, yeah, to blanket the whole continent to say there's no good leadership. I mean, I always find that a bit, you know, not a very true representation of what's going on the ground. So I don't know. What is your view on leadership in Africa?
Leadership is the principal problem in the African political system.
Okay.
Whatever challenge we look at, whatever opportunity we look at, it tends around leadership. And education alone cannot produce leadership, because leadership is inborn. The problem with Africa is that we no longer have visionary leaders. We no longer have leaders with a vision. We no longer have leaders with a vision. That generation of leaders with a vision has ceased to exist. Materialism has gotten into the politics, and those that become presidents simply lose sight of the mission and vision for which they should lead their country. I'll give an example. If we take Senegal, Senegal had a historical figure, a visionary leader in Senghor. And each leader from Senegal who comes up looks at that personality in how he wants to build his leadership. If we take Ghana, the inspiration of Nkrumah orientates whoever becomes president in Ghana. He tries to emulate. He looks up to that person.
I see.
In almost other African countries, they have failed to look up at the personality and leadership cult of the leaders who fought for independence. The second generation of leaders, the third generation of leaders have failed to take up that baton of leadership. That is why even up to the day Robert Mugabe was being pushed out, and even up till today, I stand with him.
So do I.
I stand with him today till tomorrow. Those are visionary leaders who have stood the ground. And I had written another article to say that he should stand firm, Because in all the wars the Western world has waged against him, he has beaten them. Whether it was in the Guerrilla War, or when he became president, or where George Bush Jr. and Tony Blair was pressing on him and so forth, I wrote to him and said, stand firm. You have beaten them. These are schoolboys when you were already an army leader. They can't do you anything. And you understand the rules of the game. And that's why he had told them, I've got nothing to do with you, Tony, and George Bush. I talked to the Queen. He negotiated with her, not with these schoolboys. Who were still in college by the time he was negotiating with the Queen. And he lived his mandate. And for African leadership to stay in power, if you stay in power and you are able to hold your country and your society together, so be it. But when we then remove a president and bring in another one, and the next 2, 3, 5 years we are in war, conflict, ethno-conflict wars, there's a problem. Because others have been able to hold that society together.
Yeah, I have a viewer on the show. He says, Confidence 97 says, perhaps we should create a new leadership system based on African civilization. That the construct, the Western system of this two-party state, Senate, Parliament, arms of government, executive is not our system. Does not work, and we still follow in its value, and perhaps that is where it comes to. Perhaps the leadership can't come through that system because it's very narrow, very selective, and very orientated towards a select few who already hold that power and those positions. So
that's a good point. We talk with examples because it has to be scientific. We started by saying this system is not an African creation, it's a European creation. The political system, the state system that we operate upon now, the African system was pushed aside during colonization and the European system put in place. Much of the world was colonized, except Afghanistan and Ethiopia. I am saying, if we look at Iran, if we look at the Arabic countries, if we look at China, they operate within this state system, but they have been able to maintain their own historical institutions. If we take, for example, the Iranian Revolution, when the Shah was there, when Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran, that position of a spiritual leader superseded the position of the president. The president is a European creation. Parliament is not a European creation because other cultures had a consultative assembly. But then the Iranians created that spiritual position who is the overall power broker. So when you discuss in the parliament, when the president takes his decision, the prime minister goes out to negotiate in internal, they bring it back. The president has his council. They analyze it and see what is good for their country, and then they implement.
That's an excellent point.
In our African situation, our House of Chiefs no longer exists. The chiefs have become political partners to the ruling system. So our African chiefdoms have been infused into a political system created by the European, and so they've lost value.
Whereas they should be above it.
Yes. They're supposed to be above it. That's where the first political problem comes from. Because I have raised up another argument somewhere. There are two things. The European did not teach the African democracy, and the European did not teach the African about God. Those are facts. Those are scientific truth. Jesus Christ did not go to Britain. Jesus Christ did not go to America. If we are talking Christianity. Muhammad never went there. So therefore, why do we focus on European religious institutions? Why then do we focus on European political institutions when we had empires and chiefdoms and so forth? So while the world has moved on and advanced to certain standard, there are certain historical identities, culture, project, ideas, initiative that must be maintained because these are part of distinct civilizations. It is just giving orientation because the European system dominates because we should accept it. European contribution to humanity is unparalleled. That's the scientific. European contribution to humanity is unparalleled because of technology. But the other civilizations have their own contributions that they have made that should be maintained or used to build a system that accommodates different cultures, that produce results, that creates development, that is good for humanity. But when we take African political systems and we have a president, maybe a unitary state, you have a president and he has his prime minister who he appoints, and you have a national assembly who are all members of his political party who have no vision, who have no sense of grandeur or leadership, but materialism and so forth. Not even sense of achievement. We cannot work. It will simply work to satisfy the master. So we remain in the master-servant relationship. And that master-servant relationship extends to some African presidents who are servants of European powers.
Yes, indeed.
That's scientific. That has been proven. That is a fact. We take Ghana. Why has Ghana been able to move up the ladder? Because of an inspirational leader that the new generation of leaders continue to look up to. Because of the system, the Ghanaian culture is still very intact. The Nigerian system, the Nigerian cultures in the different states is still very much intact. Development, economy, progress, modernity should almost be linked to the reality of the people. I give examples. In the US, much of what is produced is corn and wheat. American domestic consumption turns around those two products, corn and wheat. Different byproducts have come from left and right. That is the domestic economy.
Yes.
In terms of agriculture, if we take Italy, pasta, spaghetti, it's on flour, wheat. Italian economy turns around that. Pizza, pomodoro, which is tomatoes, pasta, ragu, tomato sauce. There are different dimensions of pasta, and they are able to produce industrial scale, international standard, and sell to the rest of the world. America does the same. Those of us in Africa, what is our own? We produce plantains, we produce cassava, we produce yam. What have we been able to produce out of these three crops to international level that can be exported? Fine product. Cassava can be turned into starch, can be turned into different byproducts. We don't have industries developed around that plant or that crop to sell. We don't have. In some other African countries, they do not produce that crop. If we are producing either for domestic, global, or African market, and it's either for consumption or for industrial production, these products that we have, plantains, yam, cassava, whether it's from the leaves or the stem or the crop or the roots, so many byproducts can come from these crops or from this produce. I'll give an example. India has been able to turn curry into a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yes.
In my country, from my ethnic group, from my village, from my town, we do the same thing like curry from plantains. We dry it in the sun, we ground it to dust, and it becomes a paste that we do with fish, with fresh fish. You could just sprinkle it on it like that and put a little oil, olive oil or red oil, and little like that, and you would eat with other things. It is the same thing like curry that has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. We have to package it. Signed, sealed, delivered. If we take cassava, it's all over. Could produce starch. I think Nigeria are beginning to do that.
Yes.
So it is the point of leadership. Those that are in the position of leadership and have the opportunity to direct policy and be in touch with the society, the needs of the society. That's why I call it local area study. Know the realities, the specificity of each African community. That leadership point is the principal challenge. Our leaders are not visionary. Historical families continue to dominate politics in Africa. Education can produce leaders, but when they get into the system, they realize that they can't really fit into that political system because they come in with a different approach. But the pure politician is not a leader, it's a politician, and politics is business. There's always an exception to such rules. Donald Trump has been able to produce some results in as much as in whether international relations, it is not his field. He makes some errors, that some buffoonery, but there are certain things he has been able to do. If he comes in, if Donald Trump comes in America, we know the American society the way it is, and focuses with his balance of make America great again, and he has sympathy for his white race who are in rural America, not educated, just deceiving themselves and sleeping on ignorance, and he thinks he can raise them up. Good and fine. That is a contribution. Because I will ask Obama, why did he not transform California? Even though we know that his hands were tied as part of the system. We expected if for whatever thing Obama should leave that place, transform California. What did he leave there? We have a series of good speeches, fine personality, good talk. But legacy, as a one that has an African spirit in him, is what? Well, they will tell me about public health care. That's a national right.
Yes.
That's a constitutional right. That's a constitutional right. It is when we are talking of visionary. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and all those are visionary leaders who knew that this is where I belong. And whether I say it or I do it or I do not say it or I do not do it, the challenge is there and we must take it head on. It is the same thing. It is the same thing. It's not to be daring. I don't mean that to be daring and so forth. It is my critique of Obama, even though I have support for him and I respect him and I so much admire him and so forth. But I am talking as an African to say that I thought it is true, Obama, that this partnership of the diaspora and home-based Africa would have been created. That is all. I did not expect him to come and change presidents in Africa. I did not expect him to borrow money, send more aid in Africa. No, those are dependency. No, I expected him to have created a platform, not him directly, because we know how the system operates, but a platform for which there must be a partnership, or there should have been a partnership, or at least a dynamic, create a dynamic for which there will be a partnership between the African diaspora and home Africa. And we begin to see extension of where they'll say he went to, I don't know, Kenya or Ethiopia with 200 investors and so forth, and expected it to work. Well, that's not the dynamics. It doesn't work like that. It's be a committee. It's be a committee of experts. It's be a committee of a database where people do research, propose solutions, and direct actions. If I don't know, whoever in the diaspora wants to come and establish a business or build a school or open an industry, there are civil societies. While we pay attention to dishonest people, because we know the world is a dangerous place.
Yes.
You know, but research will produce that framework, because some have done it and it has worked. Why? You know, they can make more money. They can make more money in Africa because the misconception about Africa has been created by the European. But why are the Chinese in Africa? Why are the Turkish people in Africa? Why are other countries coming to negotiate, and the Western world continue to propagate a stereotype?
Exactly. Even the Lebanese. So many nationalities are in Africa as well, but they try to keep everyone else away.
Yes, but we say this generation, we say that let the European continue in his misconception of Africa. By the time they are waking up from their sleep, this is the African Renaissance. This is a different generation. That old generation is passing away. This is a different generation of Africans. We will change it. We will change it. Let them continue to go on with the misconception. I mean the European. Let them continue. We will change. This generation will change Africa. We will create alternatives, alternative initiatives. Their system will still continue to operate. We will create alternatives. Because of the historical relations with Europe, we are not going to break the bridge. No, we will continue the relationship because it's win-win. But we are going to create alternatives. And by the time he wakes up from his sleep, it is like the British Foreign Secretary at the end of the Second World War said that lights are going off in Europe. It may never come back. It's the same Napoleon said of China, that let the dragon sleep. When it wakes up, the world will take note. They are taking note of China. The world will take note of Africa. That our generation will do. It's not me. I see it here in Africa. I see the focus now. I see the focus. I see the direction. I see the inquisitiveness. I see the ambition. It's there. For those Africans who want to remain in Europe, let them remain. Before they come back here, colleagues of theirs, their folks, their contemporaries have moved up. And they will only have themselves to blame because they will then be struggling to see where can they fit in. It's a partnership. I mean, the Western world, you know, has created this misconception, and even some Africans have bought into it, and they are, you know, stuck into that past stereotype information about Africa. It no longer exists. A part of this poor leadership, it no longer exists. It's a broad change here, whether in the cultural sphere, in the economic sense, sports. And it's only the political thing that these political leaders are leading us down. Who would have thought that African music, you know, there's no more, I'm sorry to say it about my brother, there's no more Michael Jackson here in Africa.
No, there's not.
It doesn't exist anymore. You understand? There's no more Whitney Austin here in Africa.
No.
It's a complete different thing all over Africa. That's it. That market is stopped. In terms of publicity, I'm giving you indicators. In terms of publicity, you will no longer see a billboard with David Beckham. You see a billboard of Eto'o and Drogba. These are indicators. In terms of food, you will no longer see people wanting to get whether American turkey or some sardine or People don't eat sardine anymore. We eat our food, what we produce here. The thing is just simply organization in terms of the film industry. In terms of the film industry, people no longer go to watch Bruce Lee from China. People no longer go to watch Al Pacino. People no longer go to watch Sean Connery. No, people go to watch Ukwa. People go to watch Nigerian actors, Zimbabwean actors, and African actors, and they are beginning to organize their own red carpets and to celebrate this industry, and it is expanding. So what I am saying is that if this generation of Africans have been able to break the code of these industries, we will be able to break the code of the economic and political industry. It's as simple as that. If this generation has broken that code in the film industry, music industry, agri industry, that industry, economic, political, this generation will break it. It is happening. It is happening. You have young guys, doing incredible things in other parts of Africa. It just needs a map. It needs a map that identifies what exists in this African community, country, or nation, or its extent, that is Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, Asia, and identify the products, the needs, and so forth, and develop the industry. The plantains that we eat in Africa is not an African product. It came from Latin America. So if whatever product can be produced around the plantain crop, it will be consumed in every part of Africa. It will be consumed in every part of the Caribbean. It will be consumed in every part of Latin America. The African textile, the African dress, and so forth. It's gone viral. It's gone global.
Yes.
If this can work in these industries, if this can work in these various sectors, it can work in every other sector. All it takes is for people to form a partnership, home-based and diaspora, to provide logistics, financial investment, employees, and skilled persons. It works. So that's yes, please.
No, that's fantastic. No, I'm really, really happy with your analysis. Very erudite. Talking about partnerships, I just wanted to mention if you knew about the current ambassador for the African Union in the United States. Her name is Chihombori Kwao. Yeah,
Ethiopia also.
I'm not quite sure where she's from, but she served as the chair of the African Union African Diaspora Health Initiative between 2012 and 2016. So now she's heading up the African Union. In the US, their branch. But they speaking of partnerships, she recently mentioned about the launch of a Wakanda One initiative, basically trying to create autonomous communities in Africa where diaspora can invest and build those communities and have a stake and have shares in those communities. So I just wanted to mention that or cite that as one of the schemes that would be employed and how that these partnerships can commence.
Yes.
Hopefully more like that.
Yes. So what I can say is that is why I had titled my that's why I have titled that work in Ethiopia, Ivory Project, Pan-Africanism and the Challenges of the New World Order. I called it Ivory Project Because there have been several elephant projects of this nature, and we have not had results. You get it? But ivory, in terms of symbolism, ivory from an elephant always sells. So why several elephant projects of this diaspora African partnership have been created in the past and it has not worked? My understanding is the lack of us understanding the rules of the game. And I believe that if we understand the rules of the game, the world system, economic, cultural, political, how it operates, all these things I have been saying, it will not be an elephant project. It will be an ivory project, meaning that it will sell and they will buy it. But if we just call one Wakanda and so forth, it could fly on shelves. If we have not done the basics, if we've not done groundwork, if we've not created a committee, a think tank, develop a database, who is where, who does what, who has this expertise, who can do this, who is investing, who has this gift, and so forth, and then create a committee. I'm not going to discuss it here with you. We are in the same spirit. We're going to discuss that by email. I'm going to put a project to you. We'll look at it. I'll give you the dynamics, how we're going to work it out.
Excellent.
And then all of this, we don't put it on here, else it gets to other quarters, and then that's what usually happens. When we have ideas, we begin to throw them around, and the detractors take them, infiltrate it, and before we know it, it's destroyed.
Absolutely.
Yes, we have nothing to hide. During this conference in Ethiopia, the day that the presidents were supposed to come in, and we were already in the hall, and there was a journalist, a foreign journalist who came in, and he managed to pass the security breach and so forth and got into the hall. And for some reason, he attached himself, but to me, he was trying to create a relation with me, a link, so that they will not ask him his pass and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just shook my head. I said, "Oh, he made the wrong choice." Because I simply called the presidential security and I said, "Come on, please take him out." I was the keynote speaker of that conference. I said, "Please take him out," and they were shocked. I said, "What?" I said, "Take him out." And I apologized to him. I said, "Sorry, Mr. Journalist, we have nothing to hide. The world will know what we are doing here, but for now, you are not welcome." That is our problem. Because if you have a project and you start floating it all over the place, detractors, those who want to maintain the status quo, will fit into it. And they may have more resources than you to destabilize that project. Before you execute it, you only find yourself that there were infiltrators who have brought this disaccord. That has been our problem. That has been our problem as Africans. It's not lack of confidence. No, it's not lack of confidence, but there should be some planning. There should be some systematic planning, critical evaluation of every aspect, professional application of every rule, and then implementation. At that point in time, it will just gather momentum. And we will see the results. But we keep wanting to do things according to European rules. We must stop it. We must stop that.
Excellent. I could speak to you all day, Dr. Ekongwe. I really thank you for your time. I thank you for your erudite scholarship, and I thank you for your contribution. I will definitely keep in touch with you via email and share these ideas. I would love to be a contributor in any way I can, in any capacity I can from over here as well. And I'll definitely keep in touch and keep an eye on. For those who tune in later, I've been speaking to Dr. Ekongwe, as Director of Cabinet to the Secretary General of PADWA, that's Pan-African Institute for Development. I urge you to follow him on Facebook and check out his work, the Ivory Project, and also other works that he has done and the contributions he's made in African, Pan-African development and progress. So thank you once again, and hope you have a very, very nice evening.
Yeah, thank you. It was a brilliant exchange. Thank you so much. We look forward for another discussion.
I do as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you.